my name's Sarah. Thank you for being here. If you're new to these videos, then massive welcome. If you have seen my videos before, then welcome back. Really glad to have you with me. So you may have already seen my advert saying that I'm going to be reading festive stories over the coming weeks. So really glad to have you with me, and hopefully we can have some fun together. Bit about me, my name's Sarah. I come from performance and entertainment background. So through lockdown, I was missing people myself and thought it'd be a nice way to try and connect us all, read some good stories, and just have a bit of joy in this crazy world we're living in. So hopefully you'll be on board. The first book I will be reading in the collection is a classic, The Christmas Carol. So Dickens' finest. So I'll be starting that, but it is the shorter version. So you're not going to have to be with me for the next 5 years, don't worry. So hopefully you enjoy. And then alongside that, I'm going to read some extra poems, maybe some Christmas trivias, some Christmas treats along the way. But as always, I'm very open to collaboration. So if you do want to get in touch with some thoughts or ideas or preferences, please do not hesitate to get in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you. And yeah, let's have some fun. Let's warm those coggles in my forest. It's in my garden shed. It's so cold. Let's warm together. Get your mulled wine out. Raring to go. So I'll be posting videos on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And I might add extra videos in along the way, but that'll be the standard Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And they'll be on the YouTube channel, but I'll be posting them all through this Facebook page. So please do like the Facebook page and subscribe to the channel if you wish, so then you know when all the videos are available. I will be aiming to post them about midday on each of those days. So, but they're not live, so you can catch up at any time. If you've been boozing a bit too much the night before and don't wake up, no problem. You can catch up at any time. Wonderful. Well, I'm going to get started today, and then throughout the other videos, we'll just have a chat. We'll, just connect together and see where this takes us, really. Wonderful. Get yourselves comfy. Have yourself a little cheeky cup of tea, and let's hear about some Scrooge. All right. Okay. A Christmas Carol, Marley's Ghost. Marley was dead to begin with. There's no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Mind, I don't mean to say that. I know of my own knowledge what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin-nail as the deadliest piece of ironmongery in the trade. But the regard of a coffin-nail, but the wisdom of our ancestors in that simile, and my unhallowed hands shall not disturb it, of the country is done for. You will therefore permit me to repeat emphatically that Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge knew he was dead. Of course he did. How could he be otherwise? Scrooge and he were partners, for I don't know how many years. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole assign, his sole residuary, his sole friend, and sole mourner. And even Scrooge was not so dreadfully cut up by the sad event, but that he was an excellent man of business on the very day of the funeral, and solemnized it with undoubted bargain. The mention of Marley's funeral brings me back to the point I started from. There is no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I'm going to relate. If we were not perfectly convinced that Hamlet's father died before the play began, there would be nothing more remarkable in his taking a stroll at night, in an easterly wind, upon his own ramparts, than there would be any other middle-aged gentleman rashly turning out after dark in a breezy spot. Say St. Paul's churchyard, for instance, literally to astonish his son's weak mind. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. There it stood years afterwards above the warehouse door. Scrooge and Marley. The firm was known as Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge, and sometimes Marley. But he answered to both names. It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching old sinner, hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire, secret and self-contained and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him froze his features, nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheek, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. A frosty rime was on his head, and on his eyebrows, and his wiry chin. He carried his own low temperature always about it with him. He iced his office in the dog days, and did not thaw it at 1 degree at Christmas. External heat and cold had little influence on Scrooge. No warmth could warm, no wintry weather chill him. No wind that blew was bitterer than he. No falling snow was more intent upon its purpose. No pelting rain more open to entreaty. Foul weather did not know where to have him. The heaviest rain and snow, the hail and sleet could boast of the advantage over him in only one respect. They often came down handsomely, and Scrooge never did. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. No children asked him what it was o'clock. No man or woman ever once in all his life inquired the way to such and such a place of Scrooge. Even the blind men's dogs appeared to know him, and when they saw him coming on, would tug their owners into doorways and up courts, and then would wag their tails as if they say, "No eye at all is better than an evil eye of a dark master." But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked. To edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all humans to sympathy to keep its distance, was what the knowing ones called nuts to Scrooge. Once upon a time, of all the good days of the year, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting-house. It was cold, bleak, biting weather, foggy withal, and he could hear the people in the court outside go wheezing up and down, beating their hands upon their breasts, and stamping their feet upon the pavement stones to warn them. The city clocks had just gone 3, but it was quite dark already. It had not been light all day, and the candles were flaring at the windows of the neighbouring offices, like ruddy smears upon the pallid brown air. The fog came pouring at every chink. The fog came pouring at every chink and keyhole, and was so dense without that, although the court was of the narrowest, the houses opposite were phantoms, to see the dingy cloud come dropping down, obscuring everything. One might have thought that nature lived hard by, and was brewing on a large scale. The door of Scrooge's counting-house was open, that he might keep his eye upon his clerk, who in a very dismal cell beyond a sort of tank, was copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire. The door of Scrooge's counting-house was open, that he might keep his eye upon his clerk, who in a very dismal cell behind a small sort of tank, was copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like one coal, but he couldn't replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal in a box in his own room, and so surely as the clerk came in with the shovel, the master presided that it would be necessary for them to part. Wherever the clerk put on his white comforter and tried to warm himself in the candle, in which effort, not being a man of strong imagination, he failed. "A Merry Christmas, Uncle! God save you!" came a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew, who came upon him so quickly that this was the first intimidation he'd had in his approach. "Rah!" said Scrooge. "Humbug!" He had so heated himself up with rapid walking in the fog and frost, this nephew of Scrooge's, that he was all aglow. His face was ruddy and handsome, his eyes sparkled, and his breath smoked again. "Christmas a humbug, Uncle," said Scrooge's nephew. "You don't mean that, I'm sure." "I do," said Scrooge. "Merry Christmas! What right have you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough." "Come then," returned the nephew. What right have you to be dismal? What reason have you to be more so? You're rich enough." Scrooge, having no better answer ready on the spur of the moment, said "Bah!" again, and he followed it up with "Humbug." "Don't be cross, Uncle," said the nephew. "What else can I be?" returned the uncle, "where I live in such a world of fools as this? Merry Christmas! Out upon Merry Christmas! What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money, a time for finding yourself a year older and not an hour richer, a time for balancing your books and having every item in them through a round dozen of months presented dead against you? If I could work my will," said Scrooge indignantly, "every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding, and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. He should." "Uncle," pleaded the nephew. "Nephew," returned the uncle sternly, "keep Christmas in your own way, and let me keep mine." "Keep it," repeated Scrooge's nephew. "But you don't keep it." "Let me leave it alone then," said Scrooge. "Much good it may do you. Much good it's ever done you." "There are many things from which I might have deprived good, by which I have not profited, I dare say," returned the nephew. "Christmas among the rest, but I'm sure that I've always thought of Christmas time, when it has come around, apart from the veneration due to its sacred name and origin. If anything belonged to it apart from that, it's a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time, the only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem to be one and consent to open their hearts and think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave, and not another race of creatures bound upon other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though it is not but a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good, and will do me good, and I say, God bless it." The clerk in the tank involuntarily applauded, becoming immediately sensible of the impropriety. He poked at the fire and extinguished the last frail spark for ever. "Let me hear another sound from you," said Scrooge, "and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir," he added, turning to his nephew. "I wonder you don't go to Parliament." "Don't be angry, Uncle. Come dine with us tomorrow." Scrooge said that he would see him. Yes, indeed, he did. He went to the whole length of the expression, and said that he would see him in that extremity first. "But why?" cried Scrooge's nephew. "Why did you get married?" said Scrooge. "Because I fell in love." "Because you fell in love?" growled Scrooge, as if it was the only thing in the world more ridiculous than Merry Christmas. "Good afternoon." "Nay, Uncle, but you never came to see me before that happened. Why give it as a reason for not coming now?" "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. "I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends?" "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. "I'm sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. We've never had a quarrel to which I've been a party. But I have made the trial in homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humour to the last. So a Merry Christmas, Uncle." "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. "And a Happy New Year." "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. His nephew left without an angry word. Notwithstanding, he stopped at the outer door to bestow the greetings of the season of the clerk, who, cold as he was warmer than Scrooge, for he returned them cordially. "There's another fellow," muttered Scrooge, who overheard him. My clerk with 15 shillings a week and a wife and a family talking about a Merry Christmas. I'll retire to Bedlam. This lunatic, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let 2 other people in. They were portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, and now stood with their hats off in Scrooge's office. They had books and papers in their hands, and bowed to him. Scrooge and Marley, I believe, said one of the gentlemen, referring to his list. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley? Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years, Scrooge replied. He died 7 years ago this very night. We have no doubt his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner, said the gentleman, presenting his credentials. It certainly was, for they'd been 2 kindred spirits at the ominous word, liberality. Scrooge frowned and shook his head and handed the credentials back. At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, said the gentleman, taking up a pen, it's more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessities. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir. Are there no prisons? Asked Scrooge. Plenty of prisons, said the gentleman, laying down the pen. And the Union workhouses? Demanded Scrooge. Are they still in operation? They are still, returned the gentleman. I wish I could say they were not. The treadmill and the poor law are in full vigour, then, said Scrooge. Both very busy, sir. Oh, I was afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course, said Scrooge. I'm very glad to hear it. Under the impression that they scarcely furnish Christian cheer of mind or body to the multitude, returned the gentleman, a few of us are endeavouring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink, and some means of warmth. We choose this time because it's a time of all others, when want is keenly felt, and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for? Nothing, Scrooge replied. You wish to be anonymous? I wish to be left alone, said Scrooge. Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make Merry Christmas myself, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there. Many can't go there, and many would rather die. If they'd rather die, said Scrooge, then they'd better do it, and decrease the surplus population. Besides, excuse me, I don't know that. But you might know, observed the gentleman. It's not my business, Scrooge returned. It's enough for a man to understand his own business, and not to interfere with other people. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Seeing clearly that it would be useful to pursue their point to this gentleman, they withdrew. Scrooge resumed his labours with an improved opinion of himself, and a more grumbling temper than was usual with him. Meanwhile the fog and darkness thickened, so that people ran about with their flaring links, proffering their services to go before horses and carriages, and conduct them on their way. The ancient tower of a church, whose gruff old bell was always peeping silly down at Scrooge, out of the Gothic window in the wall, became invisible, and struck the hours and quarters of the clouds with tremulous vibrations afterwards, as if its teeth were chattering and its frozen head up there. The cold became intense. In the main street, at the corner of the court, some labourers were repairing the gas pipes, and had lighted a great fire in the brasserie, round which a party of ragged men and boys were gathered, water plug being left in a solitude, its overflowing suddenly congealed, and turned to misanthropy ice. The brightness of the shops where holy springs and berries crackled, the lamp heat in the windows, made pale faces ruddy as they passed. Poulters' and grocers' trades became a splendid joke, a glorious pageant, which it was next to impossible to believe that such dull principles as bargain and sale had anything to do. The Lord Mayor in the stronghold of the mighty mansion house gave orders to his 50 cooks and butlers to keep Christmas as a Lord Mayor's household should, and even the little tailor, whom he had fined 5 shillings on the previous Monday for being drunk and bloodthirsty in the streets, stirred up tomorrow's pudding in its garret, while his lean wife and baby sailed out to buy the beef. Foggier yet and colder, piercing, searching, biting cold, if the St. Dunstan had nipped the evil spirit's nose with a touch of such weather as to lusty purpose, the owner of the scant young nose, gnawed and mumbled by the hungry cold bones, and gnawed by dogs, stooped down at Scrooge's keyhole to regale him with a Christmas carol, but the first sound of "God bless you, merry gentlemen, may nothing you dismay," Scrooge seized the ruler with an energy of action, and the singer fled in terror, leaving the keyhole to the fog and even more congealed frost. At length the hour of shutting up the counting-house arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool, and tactily admitted to the fact that the expectant clerk in the tank, who instantly snubbed his candle out, and put on his hat. "You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose," said Scrooge. "If quite convenient, sir." "It's not convenient," said Scrooge. "And it's not fair. If I was to stop half a crown for you, you'd think yourself ill-used, and I'll be bound." The clerk smiled faintly. "And yet," said Scrooge, "you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work." The clerk observed that it was only once a year. "A poor excuse for not picking a man's pocket every 25th of December," said Scrooge, buttoning up his grey coat to the chin. "But I suppose you must have the whole day off. Be here earlier the next morning." The clerk promised that he would, and Scrooge walked away with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk was the long ends of its white comforter, dangling below his waist, for he boasted no great coat, went down a slide on the Cumhill, at the end of the Lane of Boys, 25 times in honour of its being Christmas Eve, and then ran home to Camden Town as hard as he could to play Blyman's buff. Okay, going to stop there today. Hope you've enjoyed the beginning of our story, and I'll see you on Wednesday for more Christmas fun. All right, take care of yourself. Speak soon. Bye.